Maybe you don't know this, but the money in your pocket changed forever in 1971. Not a little, fundamentally. And nobody ever really sat down and explained what that actually means for your life. So let me do that right now. In August of 1971, Richard Nixon went on television and announced something most people completely missed. He took the US dollar off the gold standard. Just like that. Before that moment, every dollar was technically backed by gold. There was a real physical limit to how much money the government could create. You could, in theory, exchange your dollars for gold. But after August 1971, gone. The dollar became what economists call fiat money, which basically means it's worth something because the government says it is. That's it. No gold, no silver. Just trust. Now here's where it gets interesting. Once that limit disappeared, once there was no gold anchor, something changed in how governments, banks, and institutions behaved around money. Debt became easier to justify. Printing money became a tool, not a last resort. And asset prices, houses, stocks, basically anything with real value, started climbing in ways that felt disconnected from regular wages. Look at what happened after 1971. The great inflation of the 1970s hit hard. Interest rates eventually had to spike to 20% just to bring it under control. And since then, the pattern keeps repeating. Debt goes up, money gets printed, assets get more expensive, and people wonder why their savings feel like they're losing ground. Now, I'm not saying Nixon was the villain here. It's more complicated than that. The Bretton Woods system was already under pressure. There were real reasons the change happened. But here's what most people miss. Understanding that one moment, 1971, gives you a framework to understand almost everything confusing about modern money. Why inflation works the way it does. Why the Fed raises and cuts interest rates. Why your mortgage rate isn't random. Why central banks affect your actual life, not just economists in suits. Because once you understand that the dollar is no longer tied to anything physical, that it's managed by institutions like the Federal Reserve, a lot of things start clicking into place. You stop feeling lost in those conversations. You start asking better questions. Not, is this good or bad, but how does this actually work? And what does it mean for my decisions? Because that's the real skill, not having an opinion, having a foundation. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed trying to understand inflation, or interest rates, or why the Fed does what it does, start here. Start with 1971, because that's where the modern money story begins. And once you understand the origin, everything else starts making a lot more sense.